Hi, my name is Dmitry Morozov, and my co-host today is my friend from Dmitry Sevastianov. So I work for a company called Tachyus. We do some I'm actually fortunate to work in engineering teams that use FSharp and full stack, everywhere. We use it for web APIs, some iOS development, some data science, machine learning, Python integration, which will make me really happy. I know. So, just to be clear, today's talk is not about SQL versus non-SQL. So this talk is applicable if SQL Server is used, choice of storage engine. Is a discussion about SQL versus non-SQL is like a broader topic, is outside the scope of debate. So some interesting facts from the Nairobi Index. So both T-SQL and FSharp, they do very well. Last year, transaction SQL was language of the year, like it's mostly fastest moving up language, and FSharp as of today is also made up like 39 places since last year. So you can tell they both do remarkably well. So interesting question is they both so good, like can we just take them out and just kind of put it together? What awesome we can draw. And we can get this. This is like very, very well known like term without computer science. Usually applied to ORM, but yeah, it's just it's not until up until this moment. It wasn't really straightforward to kind of provide like very nice way to work with SQL from inside typical programming language. So let's see what's the option for typical options for a Sharp developer for transaction SQL data access. And again, like I'll narrow scope a little bit. I'm not talking about SQL in general, but specifically about transaction SQL, which is applied to SQL Server. So there are different options. Is like one is obvious is raw EDO.NET. So advantages of this is like performance, and we have complete control of transaction SQL queries. But of course, it's kind of weak abstraction, and it's easiest to work with like a lot of plumbing, very low level. Another option is to use ORM, like entity framework. It's easy to start first, but we all know that it's like not very good choice because it's kind of weak abstraction because you at certain point you hit a wall of mismatch between object-oriented programming and kind of functional style of SQL Server. In most cases, the SQL script that generated by ORM framework is like very weird, it's strange, it's very hard to optimize. Another thing is like basically whenever schema of database changes, you need to regenerate that. You need to remember to regenerate that. One more option is to use lighter ORMs like Vapor. They provide actually very good performance, but downside basically types have to be handwritten. So it's kind of I'm not going deep about these frameworks. I recommend you to go online and look at it. But basically, you need to have type first, and then it knows to map the query result into types. And the first option is to use kind of classical type provider for Sharp, like SQL provider. I believe actually we had here a couple of months ago Rosmat, who is the primary developer of this SQL provider. it's kind of nice way to use it, and like you have access to linked queries. Most obvious downside for me, it's actually hard to keep mapping between linked queries and actual SQL-generated queries. The only way to figure out what's actually supported and how linked queries mapped to SQL Server is actually just to run query and actually see what's going on. So about a year ago, I came up with this idea of a SQL common provider. Let me show actually how it works. I will try to do some live coding.
Dmitry?
Yeah.
Do you make the font just a little bit larger on that Visual Studio?
Yes, I will do that. Okay. I will large fonts on specific font. Right, so I will try to show you how to start. So how we should start working with this library. So let's create a new project. Let's pick up a tutorial project. This is actually there is official native package for this library. So because this library has more than one type provider, name a little bit more generic, so it's called FSharp.Data.SqlClient. This one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll see this a little bit strange page and some strange extra files, but don't pay too much attention to it because this library has dependency on, it has support for SQL Server partial types. That's why we take inside dependency on some like kind of C# library, but that's actually not really important for application. All right, so. Okay. So let's so in this tutorial project it generates a tutorial script file. So first thing we need to do is add a reference to the library. Okay, then just let's open namespace. Right. Now let's define some types for queries. Let's do something very simple. I need also a connection string. So let's, for simplicity, I will use my local SQL Server, but everything else works for Azure as well. So this is my local DB SQL Server. Well, that question my sheet. We got the type for query. So we get the instance of a command, SQL command. We create instance of this command, right? And now we can execute it, right? So it also knows to. So first thing you'll see, it knows to generate output for you. So slight correction here. So we know basically that the result of this query will be just single value. So we have extra parameter for provider, which is called the single row true, right? Yes, and we can execute it. create instance of command, and execute it. That's it, right? Of course, it's like very simple kind of graphical query. But one interesting thing to notice, see what happens if I'll make some mistake in this query. Let's say I just have to see there. Right? So one is so type provider will provide you with an error message. It basically knows to check your SQL syntax. So whenever you make a mistake, you'll see some meaningful error messages. Of course, in this example, it's very simple, but once you start zero, there's like bigger queries. It's actually very useful. Okay. So it's kind of not live coded. I'll check it just a little bit. So, like I said, very same thing will work for Azure. So, just to show it, let's take this connection string and replace it with Azure one. This is yeah. Let's read it. As you can see, Azure is much slower. It's actually free instance of AdventureWorks database provided by Microsoft. So let's not use it. But all things that I will show today will also work on SQL, because I think it's actually important. In Tachyus, we run most of our business in the cloud, so this is like very important for us. All this, we actually had to make some optimization clips in our SQL provider to support both regular SQL and SQL Server. There is very little difference, but there are some. All right, so let's try to do something more funny, like let's see how we can actually implement this bus. It's always fun. So something more complex. So actually, no, let's do something different. So before FizzBuzz, I want to show. Yeah, I will go like I will increase the complexity of queries gradually as I go. Let's say we want to get a list of local databases from our work with SQL Server, right? We'll do it again. Right, now, I want to talk a little bit about typical development workflow on the SQL Server. Actually, recently, I almost stopped using SQL Management Studio, and I found myself spending most of the time when I work with SQL Server inside Visual Studio. And I think it's possible because, like, probably maybe 5 years ago, Microsoft introduced this very powerful SQL data tools. So I don't need to go outside of Visual Studio, which is like really nice experience. So this is SQL Server Object Explorer is basically a way to SQL Server data tools. So now I need to type this query to retrieve list of local databases. And of course, let's say I don't remember how to actually write this query, which tables I could use. I know that it's somewhere in this schema, but I don't remember this exactly. So I have here connection to my local SQL Server. I can say new query, right? And now the nice thing that here I will have actually impulse sense. So this is kind of a combined experience between FSharp and the SQL Server data tools, giving IntelliSense and impulse mode, right? So I can start typing select from sys. Now I see IntelliSense. I don't know exactly which table I need to use. I start typing databases, right? And I see list It's probably our guy, right? And now I can play with it and see it out, right? So it seems like that's it, right? So let's reduce this flag. Let's get all the name. Let's get all the name. Right. Now we can do kind of the same. Let's reset it because we still got a measure connection. So, okay, this is the command. Here we go. Here is a list of our local databases. So, by default, SQL command provider generates list of records. I'll show you what so let's say we want actually to do some transformation on this list and to show all the databases that have been created, let's say this year, right? So if I go back to my data tools, again, uses IntelliSense. In IntelliSense, I know I see this column that I can probably make useful for me. I can go here and make it SQL. Right. That's good. Okay, so this is Excel. This is basically a list of these generated records per row. So as you see, we get IntelliSense. Or basically fields that you select in type provider. And I just can show that basically just regular FSharp. This is actually .NET data structures, and you can do any extra transformation on top of this. So we still have instances in there, basically. Yep. Yeah. Sorry. Here's a filter out by creation date. Okay, so just to prove you that it's actually right. So with a filter, level of this is 3. If I remove filter, it's a 7. Okay. Again, you get all IntelliSense here. What's really important and useful, you should have this IntelliSense on individual records, right? So you can go here and rename it as a right? Typical SQL. And now it's changing everything, right? So it means like whenever you go and change your SQL transactional skills, it reflects immediately in the file, yes?
Might be jumping ahead in your presentation if I am something to shut out, but can you do start?
Yeah, you can do start. You can use, this is one of the very nice things of this provider, because with typical link queries, you always have to guess what I can do, what I can't. Here, you can do anything available in T-SQL. Actually, to be accurate, there are some limitations, but like it's very rare actually. Right? So let me show you what happens.
run the query first to get the schema and the results, or is it?
We use two specific metastore procedures that actually knows to infer. Yeah.
And how do you handle column names with white space?
With white space?
Sure.
Yeah. So we have this. Yeah, actually, hypothetically, we'll have hard. First of all, anybody that SQL goes, right? And actually, if you make some mistakes here, you know, if you do this, you'll probably get like a compiler specification, right? Yeah, something like that, right? As soon as you make it valid SQL, this actually takes advantage of this specific F-sharp feature. You see, it goes to support basically any identifiers because it's this double. Yeah. All right, so let's move on. So actually, now let's try to write this class and see how it looks. Actually, no, let's talk about this query more. So. It does filter actually inside F-sharp code, which is good because you always want to do some transformation inside SQL, some inside F-sharp. But often actually you want to do some filtering of transformation inside SQL, right? So let's rewrite this query to do this same filtering in introduction skill, right? So this is what we call kind of inline SQL, and when it gets long, it's actually not really convenient to keep alive. So what you can do, you can use literals. So let's define a literal for this query. Now, execute complaints because it knows that you have to pass actually parameter. It won't allow you to execute query without parameter. You have no way out. So I always recommend people, especially in remote applications, to actually use another feature of Sharp for name parameters because it makes it's really easy to read.
Parameterize the name of the table.
Is it relevant to the old thing? No. Same result. Yeah, let's see. Let's check it. Yeah, same strategies, right? So this type provider knows basically change lines for input parameters and for output. Right? And yeah. So for input parameters, things like SQL injection just doesn't exist. It's just impossible by definition. You cannot do it. And again, the default, so the default output is actually a list of records. I'll show you a little bit later different options for output. Another interesting thing to note, for example, if I have only names here, right? actually, instead of list of records, it actually knows to generate it's smart enough to figure out that you actually have only one column. So this is basically a string. If you look at the type, it's string. Right? So there's no need to generate records, right? Because you have results of the single column. All right. Yeah, so how one would write this boss like in transactional scale? It's it probably won't be too short, right? So here it's another case where it's actually I found that this the combination of FSharp and SQL Server data tools is like really, really powerful because I can go back here and start playing and hacking together my boss query. It's not that short, right? So I'll change it a little bit. So this query will do the thing, right? And so it just uses like a CT expression, recursive CT expression, right? This one. So, and then so this queries can get like in practical applications that can get really, really long. So another form of input for queries supported by SQL provider is actually files. So instead of inline SQL, we can provide a file. So I already have file prepared, this one, right? So just a SQL file in my solution. You can keep the same way in projects. So if I'll go back, my query, right? So instead of having one query, I just can put name of the file. Actually, I don't know why, because it's not yeah. So let me show you. Okay. So I'm in this project tutorial tool, right? I go here, I say new item, data. Right, let's try to cut it. Okay. So I have this SQL file. Now if I go back to my XP, it's actually fine. Okay. So we try really hard to provide meaningful error messages, but in this case, okay, let's not this. So the problem is like it's actually valid SQL Server, T-SQL, but second column has no name, right? So if you try to generate record, like what kind of name is supposed to be for this column, right? So the account complains exactly about this, that the second column doesn't have name. But it actually allows us to show like another meaningful feature. So there are different output types available for SQL command provider. Actually, records, sequence of records is the most practical one, but another option, like kind of more functional, but actually it's actually in practical applications not that useful, but you can do this sometimes. but in this case, the result types is, I don't know, 1% standard word, but another result type is the tuples, right? So now it's fine, because it will generate sequence of tuples, and in tuples you don't care about names, right? So let's see. So let's create instance of the parent. Right? Yeah, so it looks strange. So, so you see the actually list of tuples. The first item, is, as you can guess, is option. People actually often complain about this, but believe me, if you go to try to analyze this T-SQL, it's actually possible that the first column is nullable. Actually, so let me step back. So, provider knows to generate for nullable columns, it always generate options. So you won't get null exception. And it's pretty sophisticated and accurate and figure out which columns are nullable. It's actually, of course, we didn't write this logic because it's really, really complex. That's why, like, SQL provider is like we have a hard time to figure out the things. It's easy to figure out if column is actually nullable, but try to figure out, for example, if it's inner join or then outer join. And this knows actually to very accurate to figure out if there is possibility to have outer column be nullable, right? So this actually doesn't look really nice. So what we can do, we can actually filter this out, because in this case we actually know that this column is null, right? So there are two ways to address it. You can actually force transactional SQL to actually think that it's not nullable, or you can filter out its in a chart, right? So let's do it in the chart. Actually, let's also filter out cases where there is nothing there, neither feasible plus, right? So what the controls? Yeah. Okay, so let's Sorry. So because it's tuple of two items, let's do this. So it's actually knows to them to destroy them. So if S right, it knows it actually, as you can see, is actually X is option type, option, right? Right? Here's much nice output. So, important thing about this snippet is like you can provide input as files. One issue is that you can actually have input inside these files, and you can play them like with results and and second thing, there are different results types available. I probably won't cover in this presentation other result types, but the other result types we also have available data reader. It's actually, so there are two sides of static type generation for this provider, input and output. So there are actually cases where we are unable to figure out output structure because there are some limitations to use 10 tables or extended store procedures. No luck, but it's still, input is still useful. In this case, we allow explicitly to specify data reader as an output, which is basically says, please no types. I'll process it on my own. This is like kind of like a dictionary. It's very rare case. I mean, I don't see people much using it, but sometimes maybe. And data table, I'll cover this a little bit. Data table is really useful for scenarios where you need to do data binding, let's say to WPF. And another very nice side effect of data tables, it's actually opens up you a way to updates. You can do updates via data table for actual data that you treat. Okay. All right. Okay, so this is a script, right? Another important thing for this provider is actually, of course, how would you provide connection information at runtime, right? Because currently you basically use hard-coded connection, right? It's not going to fly like in real application. So we have two options. First, you need to remember that this connection string is design time connection string, right? But unless you explicitly tell that provider, it is going to be actually propagated to like the production code. That's what you see in the code, right? So unfortunately, it's hard to show configuration options in the script. So I will try actually to do kind of real application. So this tutorial too, let's change it a little bit. So I'll switch it to Windows application. I will try to do some WinForms. All right. So let's set one file here. So this time, those old queries that I did before, they're kind of toy queries. So let me write at least one query that actually retrieves actual data from AdventureWorks. So I will use this query. This query knows to retrieve top and best performing salesperson by region, okay, with minimal threshold in the sales year to date, right? So this is the actual data from AdventureWorks database. So, this is actual query, but actually it has three parameters, not just one, three parameters, right? Now it complains about connection string. So there are two ways to provide, like, so this is, remember, this connection string is always designed by connection string. So we saw first way to provide this as a literal. Second way is like to retrieve this information from config file, from application config, right? And we kind of followed entity framework convention because we wanted to keep just one parameter. So the way to tell SQL command provider is I want to actually get a string from config file as this syntax. It says like name equals the name of connection string from config file. Okay. So I just need to copy this same connection string information into config. Into my config file. that's fine. It actually knows to go to config file and get this information from config file. So this is actually a nice alternative to hard coding connection strings, because this is actually already a reasonable solution, because when this code runs, like at runtime, it still goes via the .NET infrastructure and retrieves connection string information from config file. So this is something good actually.
Does this pick up normal release?
Yeah, it's like if we use web config, it's yeah. So I know it's actually confusing. So at design time, we actually SQL Command Provider goes into config file and fetches information about connection string. At runtime, the code that gets generated actually goes via the .NET infrastructure, right? So it uses settings manager, and settings manager knows to handle the whole thing. All right, so yeah, so this is actually a real application. It's not just script, right? So very simple. I just create grid view, and I do some transformation on the side. So the X key is actually similar to examples I showed before. It has like 3 columns, right? First name, last name, and sales, right? Yeah. So I have this application. Okay, now for my second example. Yeah, isn't it beautiful? Anyway, I just wanted to keep it simple. But the thing is, like, this is a way to provide configuration both in design time and runtime, right? But this is not just the only way. Actually, any generated instance command actually also allows you to pass something is wrong with this. Actually, you can pass a connection string like into constructor. It's optional parameter. So let me show. I have like somewhere I have preset examples of actual how to do it. So this is web API example. And I'm sorry, I didn't want to install the latest FSharp tools. It was kind of risky before presentation, but I know that recent FSharp tools they support SPNet and VC web API templates. They easily promise it. So this is combined solution, C#, FSharp, right? You can also go and use a community template, but here's like a short piece, right? It has this is how you structure. You probably build green project. That's how we do this, right? So you probably have a dedicated folder for scripts. Again, it has like some very simple query, actually same query that retrieves product information. Here's how you reference query. Again, you define types for query. Here's a controller, right? So here's a controller, right? Standard web API controller has 2 methods. One get without parameters and one parameterized get. And the important thing to notice, of course, is that command generated instances provide both synchronous and asynchronous execution. Actually, I was like really reluctant to put synchronous execution at all, but of course, like it was inconvenient, people asked for it. But of course, there is actually a async execute version. That's what you probably most likely to use on web server, whereas like its scalability is really important, right? So use async execute. And the interesting thing here is like, so because you can pass connection string into constructor, it opens up this ability to have IOC containers, right? So you can create instances of your commands and read configuration actually from whatever place you want, from config file, remote config server, whatever it is. You can create instances of commands and pass in connection string. So here's kind of, it's not that simple to do, kind of tricky. We could make it simpler, but I just want to have some fun. So the way to do it is, this is, here's basically a command factory, right? But it actually leverage parts that each constructor on the generator type accept string, right? So here's like static method parameters. So again, each constructor of common generated types has one parameter, which is connection string, which is optional, right? Anyway, so this is how you can do UIC and configure common instances via IC container or effectively. Yes, and just to prove that it actually works. Yes, location. So this is default. It gives back JSON. I'll change it to top 3. I see all these parameters, right? Actually, it's another very nice thing to see. There is no even need to declare types of this, right? Because those types, they infer from command, right? So this is kind of very, very nice workflow. You define your instance of the command. Type provider knows to go to database and infer types. And you basically write in your web API multiplying types, because they infer from the database, right? So this is another very nice feature. So by default, all generated types support serialization to JSON, right? So you can use it out of the web with the web API. It's actually even nicer than that. You don't see it. So let's go back to the script. So here, right? For example, right? So by default, all the properties are very read-only. We intentionally do that, right? So there is no way to mutate individual records once they retrieve. But actually, underneath is a dynamic object, right? So funny thing is that like it's inside the compiler, it's read-only, right? Properties. And because it's dynamic object, JSON infrastructure will just take it and knows to mutate it, right? So it means it's actually very, very, very nice combination. So you can it means you can use it for post in web APIs. Same types can be used for post. So it's two-way, bi-directional. Like it can be used for bi-directional communication in the web API. Right? Yeah, this is actually something new. But that type that actually looks like immutable on trunk. Not actually immutable, but you don't see it. So you cannot mutate it, right? Right. One more thing I'd like to show very quickly. So I know it's not really popular, but I have like small WPF application, but it's not actually about WPF. I just want to show that you can actually use this for updates as well. So this is some list of products from a Venture Wants database again. I can change it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Around again. I see 1, 2, 3, right? Actually, this is a little bit underdeveloped area of provider, but I hope to expand it soon because it's kind of nice way to update functionality for this provider. It's actually very simple. I would like actually to hear feedback from some people. So we have this method called SQL command, which is basically allows you to get a copy of ADO.NET native SQL command based on whatever we generated, right? And based on this, you can build a SQL adapter, and that's it. We have the SQL adapter. Sorry, I missed one part. So whatever important thing is use result type data table. So basically, what you get here, as you see, is actually a data table, right? But the important thing is that actually data table, but data rows actually static type. You still, it's yeah. So you still have C static line. This is instance of X is actually inherited from data row, but it has all the graphics inherited. All right, guys, I think it's enough about the SQL provider. Dmitry talk about another type of provider.
Good evening. My name is Dmitry Sevastianov, and I work for Jet.com, which is a new e-commerce startup located in New Jersey currently. And there's my boss over there, so please support me as well, because otherwise I'm going to be in trouble. And I'm going to talk a little bit about SQL Programmability Provider, which is another provider in the same Magnet package. And let me actually start from some slides. Okay, so it's really common for big enterprises to have dedicated teams of SQL developers isolating SQL implementation from the rest of the enterprise systems with stored procedures or possibly with user-defined tag-overlaid functions. And in some cases, the procedures are used as authorization layer. So basically, developers can only execute stored procedures. They can't look inside database, write their own queries, and so on and so forth. So typical workflow would be something like that. You would go, like Dmitry prefers to go to Visual Studio now. I'm old style guy. I keep using SSMS, so newer version. So you look on stored procedure implementation, and then like literally 20 in C# probably 50 lines of beautiful AutoNet code. You have single stored procedure code. And here where SQL Programmability Provider tries to help by injecting SSMS Object Explorer into Visual Studio Internet Sense. And let me show you what exactly I mean by that. So this part looks pretty much the same as for SQL Common Provider. Here's my object. Now, the type looks about the same, but you probably can see here it takes the same set of parameters as SQL Common Provider except actual command. So it only accepts connection string plus all of the nice things we have in SQL Common Provider. So now we just create a database. And functions for procedures. And here's basically the list of procedures. Let me see what I have here, which I wanted to show you. I decided not to try and have any retyped examples, just to show how actually nice it is to do exploration with this tool. But actually, I want to start with a function. So now, there's something to say that with this one. Okay, and I think it is a cube which takes actually person ID, which is an input parameter of this function. I wonder if I can prove that I'm not making it up.
What's it?
Oh, wait. And you see where programmability in the name comes from. Basically, this section of Object Explorer. We just thought that if we're exposing this functionality, we can as well keep up with naming conventions. But actually, I'm looking for a function. Okay, here it is. Give contact information. This parameter, which also has default value. Okay, so it has the default of -1. Right? And that's why I don't really need to provide if it has default. Let's see what it returns with the default value. This one returns a single value. Okay, don't return it. So let's provide something. All right. And just it actually returns the same record type you saw in SQL command provider. Let me put it somewhere to show how it looks like. Yeah, so it's basically a record described on a single row from the return. Now, to execute store procedure, pretty much do the same. One of those show this one. When it comes to store procedures with output parameters, we treat it slightly differently, just because actually we're still not sure if it's the right approach or not. Just coming from FSharp side, doesn't feel right when you have a store procedure which has output parameters and return some data at the same time. So we decided just not support it for now. So the way we expose to procedures with output parameters is like that. In fact, store procedure with output parameter, let me take it back. Output parameter of store procedure actually can be used as input parameter as well, which is a little bit weird, but that's the way it is. And I have some very convoluted example here of store procedure which we are using for testing purposes. So don't be scared. It basically swaps. It takes input parameter and outputs it as an output parameter, and also the two other cases just to show how it strings. And oh, this one? Oh, this one. Alright. So again, nothing to be proud of, it's just for testing. But it shows how default parameters are used and how output parameters work. Essentially, let me actually show you what it does. So it takes input, returns it as an output, and that's pretty much it. So I just pronounce. So this record has all of the output parameters and return value. And actually 5, whatever we passed through. So the same, whatever Dmitry said about options for output parameters, it applies here too. It's not always possible to figure out exactly if type is going to be nullable or not. We are trying to stay on the safe side and just return options whenever in doubt. Now we also support user-defined table types. So how do I call store procedure? Actually, I have store procedure with another wonderful name, micro. And it's pretty complex, as you can see. It takes user-defined table type and output. Okay. So how do I create something like that? For simplicity, these types are actually exposed by type provider as actual types. So I just going to do an alias for simplicity. And that's introduced. Constructor is proper to notice that the first property bin ID is required and the second one is optional. So let's say record. one other example. Let me see. I also wanted to show now how to do actual updates. So you can as well also procedure which doesn't update. Let me see if I have it right here. And this example also shows how to instantiate SQL hierarchy ID, which is a part of SQL Server types library, which we also support. And these are in view type, including what's the name for them? Special types, yes, in Azure. You can see what it does. Other than that, it's the same boring way of calling through procedure. I showed it before. Just run to execute, you're getting a result. We update this field. I'm going to check, but I don't know. And yeah, so in 2 words, these are the main features I just talked about. Here's a summary. I don't want to read it for you, and you can read it yourselves. And that's it. Yeah.
When does the connection that this thing makes to the database actually get so close? Let's say you're using some sort of lazy evaluation. How long does that connection stay open?
That's an excellent question.
Connection stay open while you because it's lazy sequence. So it's lazy sequence. Once you finish it, evaluating sequence, it gets open.
Okay.
If you want to evaluate it immediately, use like the sequence to array, the sequence to read. It will give you like immediate evaluation, right? So you want keep connection open.
Okay.
Right?
So we're handling connections for you, but there are more complex scenarios with transactions. I believe this will happen.
It's actually lazy sequence. And while you evaluating sequence, connection is open, right? If you're okay with that, it's up to you, right? Because while you're evaluating, it's open. If you want to immediately evaluate whole sequence, it gets closed, just transform it to array of it. It will give you immediate evaluation, right? Did I answer the question?
Well, yeah. But sometimes if you have to open and close the connection a lot, that takes a little bit of extra time. Is it possible to actually do the reverse, keep it open and reuse it?
Yeah, it's actually, so for now, we actually talk about this later. We can add this feature. Currently, we don't accept connection object. Possible to accept open connection object. We only accept connection string, and we can open connection for you. But I don't see it how it's a big deal because connection pool is like very effective, right? So it won't take much.
But your client library is supporting a connection pool, is that correct?
No,
we
rely on just
you're talking about the
SQL client connection pool.
Okay.
Why is there so many numbers on the result page? I didn't really understand that. It seemed like it had 4 different numbers, like all different string roles.
That's because this type, I think this toString actually shows like not only generated
Unfortunately, for this type of running, there's some little bit of definition work, but so you see for SQL reliability, you can see just here you see because it's actually inherits from the dynamic object. Yeah.
So it's not exactly presentation. Right there. So, yeah.
Actually, I have a great question about the internals. When you actually, it doesn't really matter. So, like, when you're creating a type, if you're reading the results, I'm assuming that you like have a specific function that gets emitted dynamically for each of the types.
Yeah. So just to be clear, so this was provided raising types. If you know what's raising types. So it's basically like static marker. So when you call get compile, it actually roll native into it. You can't do it. It's like as performance as basically yeah.
Yeah, we actually tested it. So with that.
Basically, all this is like when you compile it, if you open up it to like let's say vector or something, you want like what you see will be like really slow. But it will be actually basically it won't be tight, won't be tight.
Okay, yeah, because that's like what Dapper does to the task. They just also get a stack and say, yeah.
That can happen, yeah.
Yep. So I'm gonna pass over back to Dmitry. I'm going to show SQL and
Yes, I want to emphasize one thing. Like, so performance-wise, is like it's as performant as native video because we don't build anything on the top.
Oh, very close to it.
It's very close to native video. And again, like we see, like this is so SQL command provider is basically it's not really a traditional provider because it's language to language interop, right? So when like don't design type providers, it was mostly for language to data interop. This is actually language to language. Another example of language to language interop is art provider, or like and hopefully one day I'll build like Python provider. So it's like because it's like language interop. This is the advantage of this again, because once any new feature in T-SQL is available, like memory optimized tables, some other things, they immediately available for you, right? So like Link guys, like there is no way they can keep up with it. Like they always be with us several years behind, right? So this is like why it's very nice. Yes, we.
Just to, and again, this is something. Does it actually look inside the stored procedures? Understand something about them, or is it?
no, you just them all.
So this like if you like these are two different providers. That's why we have them both in the package, right? So SQL command provider actually analyze SQL, right? This one is like, think of it, we just go to database and we retrieve all the data. There is no reason for us to peek inside the procedure, right? Because it's like, we only care about interface, right? What happens inside the
We use SQL management object library.
Okay.
I could be misremembering. I may be misremembering, but I thought the SMO libraries were not generally released. You have to have SQL client libraries installed.
Let's postpone discussion about this as well. It's like SQL command provider doesn't use it.
Yeah, I figured that. The other one.
Yeah, we actually we had like too many troubles with this, so we go and replace it with something. Right, so I want to quickly show you. This is actually a separate provider. It's not part of this library. So just quickly to formulate problem statement. So you know, like sometimes, not sometimes, quite often, you have like some kind of static look of data in your database. It's relatively static, right? So example from Adventure Works database. So let's say you need to go and retrieve a list of orders that being shipped by certain ship method, right? So just to be clear, is let me see. That's actually very easy. So I'll go here. Adventure Works database. Here's information about different ship methods, right? So basically, I have this task, right? Like, I want to figure out how many orders I ship by sort of like ship methods in certain way, right? So the usual way to do it is it's like so the ideal way will be like this one, right? Basically, just write some query, you know, to correlate like probably like 1, 2 tables, and basically what you do, like you just use hard-coded ID to retrieve this ship method. Because let's say you want to look at overnight orders, right? Overnight is like ID 4. So this is going to be like our data, right? So here's our answer, right? 748 orders, right? But of course, like you heard, this is really bad according to this quantity. First of all, this code is not readable. So when I read this code, I cannot understand what this code. So this I came up with the idea of a SQL num provider, like which is really simple. It also generates nums based on lookup data from database, right? Yeah. Of course, a query that fits this type provider follows certain shape, right? So the simplest version is like name and value. So this is here. This is like name and ship method, right? The same query. So this is executed here. Right? This one. So once it gets executed, right, you see you have this type, and it actually generates. It's like enumeration, right? It generates basically static properties for each field, right? And basically it maps name into the value, right? So you can see all items. Now you can actually write this same query combining both providers, SQL and num and SQL provider, right? So here's the query. It defines on the. Okay, so this is here's a retrieve information only about orders that shipped later than a certain date, and here's I use actually link query to correlate the tables, right? And here's the ship methods is overnight, right? Basically, this generates enumerations for you out of the database. So there are two ways to generate those enumerations. You can either use like idiomatic F-sharp enumeration, which is look like F-sharp, because it gives you a little bit nicer syntax, because it has, for example, if you need to work with this as enumeration, you can use, for example, try parse, which is an option, right? And also this has this item that is a list of tuples. But actually, if you need to, you can actually generate that meta num as well. And sometimes you actually do need that meta num. So if you go here, say CLI num, CLI num, true. Now it's actually, this is why it's converted. This is actually true data enumeration. Okay? So sometimes you need data enumeration because compiler treat .NET num values as a constant, right? So if you need to write, like, for example, security system for web API, whereas you use different security roles, it's kind of like, for example, but still, like this one, when you have roles, and you can, for example, you need to run with custom authorization. Anyway, wherever you need true constants, you better off to use CLI now, right? The moment that, because it's actually this type provider is generating types, I did it intentionally for two reasons. First of all, people often ask about samples to generate type provider. This is like really, really simple, but still like real one. So you can technically use it from C#. You can declare it in temporary string project in C#, and it actually can be used from C#. Yeah. Well, guys, that's it. We have like a very nice website. Like we follow the FSharp open source standards. Like we have quite good documentation. So if you're interested to use, especially SQL command provider and the SQL provider, you go here and actually put a lot of effort to write documentation. So yeah, read it. And we can extend like, and cover some tricky cases and people may ask questions, but the documentation is there. Yeah. All right.
Please get in contact with any interest at all in talking about FSharp or even your personal project in FSharp. Anything that's cool is totally open. Thanks for coming.